Andrew, Kendra, here we go with our questions. So, first off, Andrew, I'm going to start with you. And by the way, everybody, this is the first time I facilitated like this. Usually we have a guest speaker and then they just speak, and I sit in the background and nod my head quietly with my mute button on. But today I'm going to be facilitating the questions here. So I'm going to start with you, Andrew, and I just want you to share your perspective on the value of the prayer culture at GPAC.
Yeah, thanks so much, Dale, for having us on. It's an honor to be here and to be part of this. And you're going to rock it. You're going to be an amazing host. It's going to be fantastic. Again, I think it's a really amazing gift to be a part of a church that has a really an ingrained prayer culture. Again, I think some critical passages for us have been, again, John 15 in the sense of abiding in Jesus. We recognize that it's just so critical that we live life fully immersed in the presence of Jesus. We want to live in step with him in everything. We recognize that apart from him, we can do nothing. And so prayer obviously is a really critical piece of that to continue to maintain a sense of intimacy and connection with Jesus, who's our head all the time. And I think it's been a fun part of the thing for me to step in. I'm only in this role about a year and a half, but it's been amazing to step into a church that already has a prayer culture, to inherit that. And it's a part of how we want to weave prayer into everything. Again, I think it plays out in elders meetings and staff conversations through the work that Kendra does, through all kinds of different ministries and how it plays out. Again, I think about our elders, for example, have prayed every week. They get together at 6 a.m. on Tuesday mornings to pray. They've done that for years and years and years. It's been a part of the culture, a part of the space. It's really not uncommon for us in the middle of meetings to just stop, to take a few minutes to pray about a particular issue, to ask Jesus what he wants to say about it, to be intentional to pursue him in the decisions that we're making as it goes through. It's a fun piece of the deal. And I think for me as the lead pastor, a part of it, I really see like I want us to function like a body. Again, I think in 1 Corinthians, Paul presents such a beautiful image of the church where everyone has a vital role. And I see, again, that I have a particular role to play. And a part of that role is really helping others to flourish and to thrive, to become a part of the work and to flourish in the unique piece of what they have to give. I think Kendra is a great example of that, someone who's passionate, gifted, capable of just really leading really well. And I want to affirm her and bless her and encourage her to lead really well in all those spaces. I also want to make sure that I'm modeling prayer well in my own life and in the way I'm interacting, the way I'm leading our staff team and the board as well. And just continuing to encourage them and affirm them and bless them into leading well in all of their particular areas as well. That prayer isn't something that one person does or that I own it, but that we recognize Jesus is the head of the church. We want to honor him well. We want to serve him well, and just make sure that our relationship with him permeates every part of what we do. So again, that's kind of a short
Yeah,
answer.
that's great. That's great. And you mentioned it's a year and a half, or just about a year and a half, that you've been there at the church, which is, I was supposed to point that out at the beginning here, but missed that. But yes, that is a unique thing. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute here. One of the things that I picked up on what you just said there is that in the middle of a meeting, you'd stop and you'd pray. And it's interesting because one of the reasons I know both of you is because the Billy Graham organization is doing a celebration with Will Graham in Grande Prairie this year. And so Kendra's been part of the prayer team that we have there. And so that's how I get to hear a little bit more about what you're doing. But with our working team, prayer working team, when we meet, Kendra would be the one who would go, okay, let's stop and pray about that. So definitely that's been something that's weaved into the culture there at the church. And the fact that you pointed that out is an interesting point there too. So Kendra, why don't you describe for us what is happening in the area of prayer in your church there, and how you're leading that?
Yeah, thank you, Dale. So I feel like I'm perhaps in charge of some of the official scheduling of prayer in our church, but there's lots of other avenues, some that Andrew already pointed out, that are happening just because we have a prayerful church, and that's lovely. I don't have to have my fingers in everything, but the things that I do assist with is we have after service prayer teams. So after every service, we typically have 2 services every Sunday. We have a team of people scheduled who go up to the front of the church and are just available for prayer. And that's been going on for years already. And so it's just become a normal thing. If people need prayer, they walk up for prayer. And that's really lovely how just the consistency of doing it for years has now made it just such an easy thing to continue. And I have a dedicated team of volunteers who all I do is schedule them and they show up. We have a Sunday morning prayer meeting that about 5 or 6 of us, not very many, show up for, but it's lovely because just every Sunday morning we meet together to pray over the service, over the church, over what's going on in the life of the church. And then once a month we have a prayer gathering that I lead on a Sunday evening, where it's an open invitation, all ages, and we have a varying number of attendants shows up just to pray together. And I love to change up the format. Sometimes people are grouped into groups of 4, and sometimes it's a big, gigantic circle that we all have to sit in, and we just switch that up. And then the other official arm of our prayer ministry is our restoration prayer team, that's talking about inner healing and soul care. And we started out all ready to help with the part of the deliverance part of soul care is kind of where we were trained. Our church was presenting that weekend program or week-long program once a year. And so that's what we were trained for. And it's turned into a ministry that now people can access at any time just by contacting the church office. And I put a small team of people together to go pray for the person and just see what Jesus has to say to that person. Sometimes it's inner healing, sometimes it's just helping them hear the voice of Jesus.
Yeah, that's great. And I know there's other churches that are doing similar ministries like that, but not a lot and not enough churches that are connecting with people at that level where, and I often say when we talk about revival in our country, if revival broke out, we need a boatload of counselors, but it's related to us recognizing the Holy Spirit kind of convicts us of the things that are going on in our life that we need to get right with him. And then to have people to walk alongside of people that are going through that process. And that's what I think that the prayer ministry is at the root of that, is at the starting end. And you mentioned soul care. That's one of the ways, kind of a key way for you to be able to identify people who need that kind of prayer. Is there any other ways that people end up finding that group or getting into that deliverance ministry?
We have another similar program at our church called Set Free. Kind of they tend to go well hand in hand. Andrew, shake your head if you disagree with me. And that's the team would access people through both. And then it's typically just by word of mouth. Like team members will be visiting with one of their friends and be like, oh, I think you need prayer for that. I think there's some healing that needs to happen. Or I think you believe some lies. Let's maybe meet with a couple of other neutral people outside of your friend group and just have them pray with you and see what Jesus says about that. And that's what I love about the team, is that we've switched away from, at first we were pretty heavily on deliverance focused, and we've switched it now so that it's much more open to just, what does Jesus want for this person at this time? Because as much as we would love to hammer through complete healing in a half-hour prayer session, that's not usually what happens. And so then it's much more open to people who haven't just been through soul care. It can be a participant who walks in off the street and just needs prayer over something.
Yeah, that's great. I want to come back to the question, or the idea of the fact that, Andrew, you're fairly new at the church, and this was an already existing ministry, had been existing. I think, Kendra, you've been involved in this for 5 years now, I think. And so talk a little bit about how the integration process of that with an already existing prayer ministry for you, Andrew, coming into this environment. How did you transition into that? How did that work? Kendra, you can comment as well into that as well.
Yeah, I think it's always like interesting thing to step in as a new leader. I think there's always that temptation as the leader to feel like you need to kind of put your fingerprints on everything. And so part of it is just the resisting my ego and desire to make it feel like mine. I think it feels a bit more like gardening, right? It's a bit more like looking at a great flower bed and thinking through what are the really strong spaces that we want to nourish and make sure they have the water and the nutrients that they need, what needs a little bit of space to flourish and to grow. And are there any seeds of things I want to plant in the midst of what's going on as well? And so I think for me, it's been a whole lot of just saying, this is a really beautiful, really strong ministry that Jesus is doing amazing things through. How do I continue to support it and affirm it and strengthen it and build into it? Again, I think it helps that, Kendra and her husband Nathan and us were friends as family. So again, that makes it a lot easier that we know each other well. And there's kind of a friendship there as well. Yeah, and again, I just feel like it's been a good gift to come in and be able to just continue to affirm and support and strengthen. Again, we don't always do this perfectly. There's lots of things we're still learning and growing. But I think I see my role stepping in as saying, how do I affirm what's going really well, continuing to bless it and strengthen things that need it as along the way as well.
Kendra, what's your thoughts? How did the transition work from your perspective, and how is that working?
Really lovely, because when Andrew came in, I didn't know if he would even want to still have a layperson or me in that position. So I was like, I don't know what's about to happen. And we met within about the first 2 weeks of him getting there, and he was just like, yeah, keep going, sounds great. And it's been really lovely, because that's exactly what I've been able to do, is just keep going. I'm not ministry trained, and so whenever I have issues, I have a very open relationship with both Pastor Andrew and another pastor, Pastor Rod, and they are so inviting of me firing off an email and just answering and helping me through anything, which is, I think, a really big key point, is that as a layperson, I'm sometimes running at a deficit. I'm always running at a deficit. And so the ability to have support, but also them not, I can be a bit of a loose cannon. So just being able to just run with the gifting and with the personality I have, and being affirmed in that, and not felt like they're saying, okay, but don't do this. It's been really lovely.
That's great. So, and maybe you touched on this already, but maybe describe what some of the greatest challenges that you face in leading the ministry.
So yes, there are some, and likely it's just, as a layperson, I am outside of the staff circle, and not intentionally. They're very invitational to me, but just because I have a full-time a business that I'm running and a family, I'm not, the prayer ministry often doesn't take first precedence in my life, as much as maybe that's unfair to it. And so it's very easy for me to feel separate from the other ministries of the church, and not know what's going on as immediately as everybody else, not have my plans made as far into the future. And it's easy to feel lonely, but I think that's probably par for the course for anybody in ministry, to just sometimes feel like, um, you don't have the proper peer support or the proper help. And again, no fault at all of pastoral ministry. They do their best, but I would imagine most people in ministry end up feeling like that, where you just don't feel like you're well equipped for what you think you should be doing. And because haven't always been in that culture, sometimes that comes as a surprise to me, that I'm feeling like that, and I have to remember, no, this is normal, it's okay.
Yeah. And Andrew, any thoughts towards that? I know you mentioned already that you and your wife and Kendra and her husband are good friends, so there is a good communication, there is a good connection there. But any thoughts that you can share from what she just talked about there?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, again, I think it's an ongoing part of our conversation too. Again, seeing what's the best dynamic of relationship. We've experimented with a few things, again, so like having Kendra come into all staff meetings and some other pieces like that. And we've just kind of gone back and forth a few times on different things to think about what's going to be the best fit for who she is, the season of life that God's called her into, and also our team dynamic. So, and I think we're still experimenting, and I think that's a part of the dynamic that is just really important always, is there's a good, healthy level of communication, that we can be open and honest, and also that we just keep trying things as they come to mind. We keep kind of working out how do, I make sure that Kendra has the space to really flourish and experiment and try the things that she needs to. How do we make sure that we try and keep the boundaries and lines of communication really clear, so that she doesn't feel outside of the flow? And I think it's just a journey, and I think that that's okay. Like, we're just figuring it out. We're still working at it. Yeah.
Yeah.
More than it being a negative, it's just something to be aware of. Like if you're going to have lay people working in ministries in your church, there is going to be a bit of separation. And so just navigating that as best you can, which I really think that we do at church. It's just there's no perfect system.
Yeah. Yeah. Kendra, I was going to ask you another question that I'm going to put off till maybe a little bit later. And I saw in the chats there's a question came up, which was another point that we're going to address, but we might as well do that now. I think it was Neil who was asking the question about how the prayer has made an impact on the community as a whole. So we're shifting the conversation a little bit here, but it was something that we wanted to address. So yeah, just maybe speak a little bit into how I know that you have a good prayer culture. I've come into this community just this year and sensed that there's a real good prayer culture amongst many churches, and there's a number of people that have been praying and praying for the community. So maybe Kendra, you speak first, and then Andrew, you can speak into what you're seeing and observing, and we can chat a little bit about the impact on the city of the prayer emphasis that you have.
I feel like this is more of an Andrew question, but my input on this would probably just be that the members that we have on our different teams, those who have volunteered for the different prayer teams, are bringing that into the community. It's, you know, we'll meet together once a month and talk about their stories of what they've experienced, and just the way that they're able to pray with freedom over people. That, yeah, I'm not as involved in the church city connection, so I think it's probably better answered by Andrew.
Yeah. Andrew?
Yeah, I think one of the two things that I think of most are, I think, like kind of like Kendra said, I think our people feel so much more equipped to engage prayerfully. Again, last night I was chatting with a guy who's a train engineer, and he was saying about how like he just feels so much more confident to like one of his coworkers is agnostic, and he just said, "Yeah, can I just pray for you for the struggle you're having with your family?" And they just dove in, just prayed together right there. And then his friend, like 5 minutes later, started asking him, "So what is it that you believe?" And again, I think because it is increasingly normal for us to just let's pray about it now. I think people are taking it into their workplaces, into their home environments, into their community organizations. I think that's making an impact. I just feel so much more normal. I think also we're just seeing God do really amazing and exciting things. You know, there's been numerous times over the course of the last year where people have just shown up at the church, our church, other churches as well, just really like wanting to know more, realizing they have a need for God, or they've been thinking about it for a while, but just kind of choosing to come in. And just multiple times where someone's just come in saying like, I would like to get to know God. Can you help me to do that? I think that's just a product of the faithfulness of so many people who've been intentional to pray for so many years and decades, for our city, for our region, and just a really beautiful gift, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's actually an amazing point, because I've talked to so many people across the country and even some in other parts of the world where they're experiencing people just showing up to church randomly with nobody inviting them. It's like the Holy Spirit. Just even 2 weeks ago, somebody showed up to our church and he said, "I just drove by the church and I felt compelled that I needed to come there." And I've shared stories myself of a year ago where somebody came to the church, and I asked him how he came, and he said a friend of him told him about the Chosen series. So he watched the Chosen series, and then we ended up leading him to Christ. And we asked, what church does your friend go to? And he said, "I don't even go to church." His friend doesn't even go to church. And so, you know, I'm hearing more and more stories, and I really do believe that there's this prayer movement that's happening. 34 years of ministry for me full time, and I don't think I've ever seen this kind of a interest in prayer nationally, right across the country. And I think what you just described is what many are experiencing, where the Spirit of God is starting to move. It's like the trickle of the revival just starting. And just another point, we were talking about this last week when we were together, and that is between three churches in the community, there was I think it was 28 people that were getting baptized. Or no, it's a total of 42 people between three churches that got baptized. One was 17, one was 13, another was 8, but then out of testimonies, it ended up being 12. And then you said that you, at your church, you set a record for 1 day baptisms. What was that number that you guys had that 1 day?
I'm trying to remember. We baptized 61 people so far this year. I think it was 29 in a day. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just really exciting. It's just, yeah, amazing.
Yeah, and it's just, again, that's a sign that the Spirit of God is moving. And I really think part of it is when you create that prayer culture. Historically, that's where revivals, the history of revivals, comes out of this movement of prayer. And you guys are seeing some of that taking place already in your own church and then in the broader community there as well.
Yeah.
Kendra, is there a specific God moment, God story that you can think of that has come out of, obviously you can't share all details, I'm sure, but what would be a God story that you've sensed come out of the prayer ministry there?
What did I say when we talked about this?
I
I feel like I had a specific story and now I'm blanking.
remember.
Oh, okay, so nothing's coming to mind, but there are lots, but nothing is jumping out. But if I could answer that just a little differently. What I love about our prayer gatherings on Sundays is that we've started sharing God stories with each other. And so it's the verse that says something about sharing what God's done for the edification of the saints. One of you can tell me what it is. But to me, it's really, really important to be sharing the stories of what God is doing in order to encourage and edify and just keep people on their knees, keep people praying and hoping. And so we've made the last 15 minutes of all of our prayer gatherings, our monthly prayer gatherings, time when people can just speak up and share what God is doing, what he said to them, how he's working in their lives. It's just like an open door for whatever you feel like God is saying, tell them this. That's what they do. And that has been encouraging, and intimacy that it's brought to our prayer gatherings, because now we're hearing of people's hopes and dreams, their stories, the things that they are caring about. So yeah, I actually am totally blanking on a personal story right now, but I would highly recommend sharing them when.
Yeah, no, that's okay. And actually, it ties into, there's another question I saw in the chat there about how do you motivate people to pray? Because, I always use this term, prayer doesn't sell well. It's sometimes hard to motivate people. Hey, we're going to have a prayer meeting and not too many people show up. And, and even what we're doing here, if you think about how many churches there are in the country and how many people are actually on the prayer meeting, and it's not a slight on anybody because everybody has busy schedules, but how, one of the things that I think is when you share testimonies, when you share stories. And so is there anything else that you can think of that helps encourage people to want to pray?
I would just say encouraging people to see the good things in their life. And I mean, we don't want to say you're praying for only good things, but to recognize that as God's goodness and answer to prayers. And this goes way before my time in the prayer ministry, but 22 years ago, our first daughter was born at 3 pounds, 7 ounces, almost 8 weeks early, and in Edmonton. And so we went to Beulah Alliance and put in a prayer request for her. Our church sent out a prayer request all over, like it reached, we figured there was at least 700 people praying for her. And she was expected to have many, many complications and grew up like completely normal with follow-up tests and stuff like that. And could that have just been like, okay, that just happened, that's just sometimes the things that we think are going to happen don't. But no, we choose to see it as a miracle that God provided healing through all those people praying because the diagnoses were grim. And just like choosing to recognize those things as God's hand at work instead of being so blasé about it and saying, oh, I mean, I can't tell if that's God. Let's just say that's God.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
I think
amazing. Oh, sorry. Did you have something you want to share, Andrew?
I was just gonna say, I think two other things that have been helpful for us is to keep from the idea of praying together as a communal experience. I think again, the levels of loneliness are so high, and the capacity to invite people into a space to be known, to express things together to Jesus is really appealing. I think that sells better than the idea of a prayer meeting, the concept of being together, to be known and to share our needs together with God. And I think also just helping the church to keep falling in love with Jesus. I think the more we see him, the more we know him, the more we long to be close to him. And then it's not hard to convince people to engage with prayer in the same way because they just keep falling in love with him. So I think that's also helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm looking at the time, and it's gone really well. We originally were actually going to invite Curtis Peters, who's the district superintendent for the Alliance in Eastern Canada, to be a part of this, because he's also responsible for the prayer initiative for the Alliance denomination as a whole. Curtis is actually your brother-in-law, Andrew, and Curtis is also on the Ignite Prayer Canada team as well with Willie. And so that's why I wanted to invite him here. But recently, they had their national conference, and prayer was put at the top, I think, of one of 4 different key areas. Could you speak a little bit about that and how that impacts you guys as a church, if that makes any difference, or just speak in terms of the emphasis on the denomination as a whole?
Sure. Yeah, again, I'm sure other people could, Bernie on this call might be able to speak more clearly to that. But again, the president in his 4 key strategic priorities had prayer as number 1. Again, just recognizing the critical nature of prayer to the life of who we are as a denomination. I think for us, it feels like a good affirmation. It feels like a really good, we need to continue to press in and move forward in things that God's called us to do and that we're engaged with currently. Again, Kendra's been a part of Curtis's team on that. And so, again, she's played a part of that dynamic conversation as well. I think for us, it just continues to be an affirmation that we should continue to move forward and keep pressing to the things that we are doing. And exciting to be able to be a part of seeing other churches engage with it meaningfully as well. We're excited to learn all kinds of things from other congregations as they also press in. Because again, we recognize we have a lot to learn along the journey as well. But it's just exciting to see that sense of passion denominationally for prayer overall as well.
Well, I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, and as usual, time flies by very fast. I want to give you an opportunity, Kendra and Andrew, is there any kind of final comment or thought that has been in your mind that you want to share that maybe I forgot to ask, or something's on your heart, and then we'll close up. Kendra, do you want to start?
To consider this model as a great option for your church, even if it's only going to be a stopgap. Like, even if your hope is to eventually have prayer raise even more into pastoral leadership, if you have a person passionate about prayer in your church, giving them the freedom to run with this ministry, just it helps your church get to the point where it has a prayer ministry. And I still always think that I'm only here until a better person is found. So far I guess I'm it. But like, eventually I think the prayer ministry is going to have to move past me and my resources. But until I'm told that by either Andrew or God, I guess I'll be here.
Yeah. And that's another, the future step for the church potentially is considering a staff person, which some churches have done. Andrew, thoughts for you? Final thoughts?
Yeah, again, I think for me, again, just the prayer of pursuing ongoing relationship with Jesus, just like the sense of clarity and openness. I think we want to be careful that prayer doesn't become the goal, but that Jesus always stays as the goal, and that we continue to navigate that well. And also, like from a pastoral perspective, I think the critical nature of giving the ministry away is really important. I think that it never feels centered simply around me or around one person. Again, I think Kendra's great at that. I think our team is really good at that we keep giving away the ministry of prayer, keep inviting people in, making it feel like it's something we all do together, that it's not for the professionals, that it really is a critical piece. I think it's part of the value of having a lay leader lead the prayer ministry, is that it doesn't become sort of hierarchized, but we recognize all of us can do it. We all have a critical part to play. So I think that's probably pretty critical as well.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much for both of you being on the call, and we look forward to how this it'll be on video and people can look at it in the future, how it can help them and impact them in their future ministries as well.